GitHub repository. If you don't want to watch the whole tutorial from the start, you can initialize the code from this repository to launch the part of the app that we have already created and continue to watch the next tutorial. Just click this button and download the zip file, or you can clone it by copying the URL, then head over to your desktop and create a new folder. I'm gonna name it my repo. After you click, then git bash here. Then type git clone, paste the URL and hit enter. It's gonna pull everything, this repository, into this folder. So go ahead, open the VS Code on this folder. Open up the terminal and then type npm install, press enter. It's gonna install all the third-party libraries and all our dependencies, as well as a bunch of other tools we're going to need when building this application. So if it's done installing, then type npm start and hit enter to launch our development server. So here's the next part of the app that we're going to build in the next few seconds. So let's jump in and continue to take this app to the next level. Back to VS Code and squeeze the repository folder to the left. Then open up the folder of the app that we have been working with from the previous tutorials. Then I'm going to copy the CSS file once and for all. So let's go ahead and delete index.css from our project folder. Then copy index.css from the repository folder. Paste that here to replace the file we deleted. Then close the repository folder, back to our project folder, and launch the development server one more time. So I'm going to render data into a cart component and then add items into a shopping cart. So let's go ahead and do that. Back to VS Code, close the terminal, then go ahead inside a context folder and create cart context.js. So I'm going to import React, then I'm also going to import create context, use state, and finally use effect hook. So what this create context does is that it creates a context object and allow us to use it inside our consumers. Since the components are going to be in another file, I'm going to export the cart context object and set that equals to create context. Next, I'm going to create a component for this context object. So I'm going to write constant cart context provider and then take props parameter and return angle bracket cart context dot provider closing tag. Inside of this tag, I'm going to write props the children. Then I'm going to export the component. This component that we created allows consuming components to subscribe to context changes. So let's create a name variable and set it equal to a string of combo. Then I'm going to pass the name into a value object so that it can be accessed by the consuming components. The cart context provider accepts a value prop to be passed to consuming components that are descendant of this provider. Save the changes and open up the app component. I'm going to write the cart context provider inside of product context provider. Then I'm going to select the navbar, all components that are inside of the switch tag. Then Ctrl X to cut and wrap all of that with cart context provider. Now all our parent components are descendant of both the cart and the product context providers. So save the changes and close that once and for all. We're never going to touch that again. So go ahead and open up the cat component and then import useContext from React hooks. I'm going to destructure the cat context object and receive the name value and set that equal to useContext. Then inside of this braces, I'm going to write the cat context and import that here at the top. Mine is already imported automatically. Then go ahead and console the name value we received from our cat context API to see if this works. Save the changes, back to our browser, open up the dev tool, and as soon as I navigate to the cat page, you'll see the name value roughly here inside the console. So back to VS Code, then go back to our cat context and create a state. I'm gonna name it cat, give it an initial value of empty list. Then I'm gonna write a function of add to cart, which take an ID as a parameter, and then console a string which says add to cart invoke plus the ID value we are going to receive when firing this function. Then go ahead and replace the name value with cat and then add to cart function. Save the changes, then go back to our cat component again, replace name with the cat value, and instead of name, let's console the cat. Now let's go back to our home component and destructure the cat context object and receive only add to cart function from the cat context API. Then go ahead and import that here at the top. Mine is already imported automatically. Go down below the product component and then pass toggle as well as add to cart function as attributes. Save the changes, then go ahead and open up the product component and then receive toggle as well as add to cart function as our props. Then down below the link tag, I'm going to create a div tag and then give this div a style and use the toggle value to check if it is true. Then give it a style of left and set that equal to 0 pixels and set top to 12 pixels. Then return a null if the toggle is false. Now go ahead and open up data.js file, and we see inside of this object we have an ID and incart property set to a value of false. I only wanted to show you that we have an incart property, so close that. Then if we go back to our home component, you'll see we have destructured the properties for this object by using the split operator. That means we can go back to our product component and receive the other properties, which are the ID and an incart properties. Then go down below and say if an incart value is true, I'm going to return a self-closing tag, then head over to React Icons website and search for a tick icon, and then copy this one back to VS Code, then import curly braces and paste the icon from React Icons package, then /ti. Go down below inside our self-closing tag and paste the icon, then give it a class name of icon. And if an incart is false, again create a self-closing tag, then head over to React Icons website and search for a cat icon. I'm gonna copy the first one back to our component, again import curly braces, then paste the icon from React Icons package /ai. Go down below inside our self-closing tag and paste the icon. Again, give it a class name of icon. Finally, let's create an onClick event and fire the callback function, which is add to cart, and then pass an argument, which is an ID. Set the changes, back to a browser. First, navigate home component, and then open up the dev tool, place the cat icon button, and here inside the console, we log a string which says add to cart invoke, and next to it is an ID property coming from the current product of this icon button that we have just clicked. Back to VS Code, then head over to our card context and import data here at the top. And then create another state. I'm going to name it exact. Give it an initial value of data. Now, since we have an ID property returned to us inside of this function, let's create a variable and give it a name of new card. Set that equal to an empty list. Then write exact dot for each product and then say if product.id is triple equal to an ID parameter, then return new card and set that equal to a list split operator to copy the card, a comma, and then a product. Finally, set the card into a new card variable that we created above. Save the changes, back to our browser, navigate to card page and open up the dev tool, refresh the page, and we have an empty list. Now navigate back to home page, and here inside the console we have an empty card. Refresh the page, but now if we add the product, then navigate to card page, and here in the console we have a list of an object inside of it. Let's try again to add more items. Then navigate to cart, and we have another list with a bunch of objects inside of it. Back to VS Code, delete the console. Now let's create a variable sum and set that equals to 0. Then say cart.for each product, and then return sum equals to sum plus product.price. And then replace a paragraph with a section tag and give it a class name of cart. And inside, I'm going to use ternary operator to check if cart.length is greater than 0. Then return a div tag and give it a class name of total. Inside, I'm going to create a h2 tag and say total cost, a colon, and then a span tag. And inside, I'm going to write a $sign and render a dynamic value of sum. And then down below, I'm going to create a button which says clear cart, or else I'm going to return another div tag and give it a class name of empty. Then create a h2 tag which says empty cart. Save the changes, back to our browser. Now since we haven't added anything inside our cart, therefore we have an empty cart rendered to the browser. Back to VS Code, again I'm going to use ternary operator to check if cart.length is greater than 0. Then I'm going to return a div tag and give it a class name of titles. And inside I'm going to create a h2 tag which says brand. Then I'm going to copy that and paste it down below 4 times. Then I'm going to change that into price. Again, change that one to amount. And also I'm going to change that to delete. And finally, change the last one into total price. And if anything else happens, I'm going to return a null value. Finally, let's map the cart into a product, then an index, and return a component. First, we need to go ahead and create this component. So let's go to our file panel, and inside our components folder, I'm going to create another folder and name it cart. Then create a child component and name it item. Then go ahead and import React, create a constant to represent the name of the function for this component, and then return a paragraph which says item component. Export the item component, then head over back to our parent component and write an item component. Then go ahead and import that here at the top. And then go back inside our child component and give it a key attribute equals to product.id. Also, I'm going to write product equals to product, and finally write an index attribute. Save the changes, back to our item component and receive product as well as an index. Then I'm going to destructure the product into a name, image, and price, and set that equals to product. and replace a paragraph with the div tag and give it a class name of cat item. Inside, I'm going to write another div, give it a class name of image bg. Inside, I'm going to create an image tag with a source attribute and then render a dynamic value of image and a width of 190 pixels. Again, create another div and give it a class name of wrapper. Inside, I'm going to create a h3 tag and render a name value. Then down below, I'm going to create another h3 tag with a $sign and then a dynamic value of price. Down below, I'm going to create another div and give it a class name of count. Inside, I'm going to create a span tag with a subtract. Copy that and paste it 2 times and replace that with a 0 and then a plus sign. Down below the div tag with a class name of count, I'm going to create another div tag. Inside, I'm going to create a self-closing tag and then head over to React Icons and search for delete. I'm going to pick this one. Back to item component and import curly braces, then paste the icon from React Icons package /RI. Then back down below inside our self-closing tag and paste the icon and give it a class name of delete. And then create a h4 tag with the $sign and then render a dynamic value of price. Save the changes, back to the browser, refresh the page. Now, let's add the item to the cart, and our items are successfully added to the cart. Beautiful. Now, I want to change this button into a tick icon to indicate that the product is added to the cart. So let's go ahead and do that. Back to VS Code and close everything. Then go ahead and open up the product context and then create a function. I'm going to name it handle cart. And it takes an index parameter. Then I'm going to console a string which says handle cart invoke plus an index parameter, and then pass handle cart into a value object. Then go ahead and open up the home component and receive handle cart from the product context API. Down below, I'm going to create a function and give it a name of handle change, and it takes an ID and an index parameter. Then I'm going to console a string which says handle change invoke plus an ID, a space, then an index. Now, instead of calling add to cart from the product child component, I'm going to fire handle change and call add to cart as well as handle cart. So let's go ahead to our product child component and do that. But first, replace add to cart with handle change function, and then go ahead and open up the product component. Again, remove add to cart and replace that with handle change. Now, instead of calling add to cart, I'm going to replace that with handle change and then pass an ID as well as an index. Save the changes, back to the browser, open up the dev tool. Now, if I click to add the item, you'll see here inside the console a string. Then next to it is an ID and an index parameter. But if we try to navigate to the cart, then you'll see an empty cart because we haven't called add to cart function. So let's go ahead and do that. Back to VS Code, then go back to our home component and uncomment add to cart as well as handle cart. So we have already passed an ID and an index value to this function. Just delete the console.log and save the changes. Back to our browser, navigate to home page. Again, let's try to add the items, and we have a string handle cart invoked, and next to it is an index value. Now, let's navigate to the cart, and we have our items added to the cart. Back to VS Code, head over to product context, and back to our handle cart function. Remove the console.log, and let's create a constant and name it new products, and set that equals to a list, and use the split operator to copy the products and say new products, then an array with an index value dot incart, set that equals to a true value. Finally, set products into a new product. Save the changes, back to our browser. Now let's click in Add to Cart, and we see a tick icon indicating that the product is successfully added to the cart. Navigate to cart, and here we have our items. Beautiful. But now, if I add to cart and then click buy now, you'll see we still have add to cart. So let's go ahead and fix that. So back to VS Code and close everything. Then go ahead and open up single item component, and then head over down below to our add to cart button. Now, instead of just saying add to cart, I'm gonna use ternary operator to check if an in-cart value is true. Then say in cart and write add to cart if an in-cart value is false. Save the changes, and as soon as we open up the browser, we can see the button has changed to indicate that we have already added this item to the cart. Back to our home page, and let's try to add an item and then click buy now, and we see an in-cart button rendered to the browser. But now if you click buy now and then place add to cart button, it's not going to work. So let's go and make that work. Back to VS Code, go to your file panel, and inside the components, I'm going to create another folder and give it a name of single item and create a child component of size. Then I'm going to import React and then use state hook and create a constant to represent the name of this function for our component, and then create a state of range, give it an initial value of 0, and return a form with a class name of size. Inside, I'm going to create a label and write size, then a span tag, and then render a dynamic value of range. Down below, I'm going to create an input and give it an ID of range and the type of range. Then give it a minimum value of 1 and a maximum value of 15. Finally, export the component and then go back to parent component of single item and import size component here at the top. Then go down below inside the section tag with the class name of single item and write our component here inside of that. Save the changes, back to our browser, and we have our size filter rendered to the browser properly. But it's not doing anything. So let's go back and make that work. Now, we have successfully rendered everything to our DOM. We have only remained with the functionality for a single item in the cart page. Back to VS Code, open up the cart context.js. So, you remember we created an exact state and give it an initial value of data right here. We haven't used that to any of our components. So just go ahead and pass that down here below inside our value object. Then go back to single item component and destructure the cart context and receive exact. Set that equals to useContext, and then write the cart context inside the braces and import that here at the top manually. Mine is already imported automatically. Then create a state. I'm gonna name it shoe. Give it an initial value of exact. Again, create another state for checking if we are using the size filter. Set that equals to a false. Then I'm going to create a variable active and set that equals to an empty list. Then say if check is false, set active into products an array with an index number of item value. And if check is anything else, then set active equals to shoe an array with 0 index. Now, instead of the structure products, I'm going to replace that with active. Then go down below and create another function of handle size, and it takes a parameter of value. Then I'm going to console a string which says handle size invoke plus the value parameter. And then I'm going to pass that into a size component. So handle size as an attribute. go to size child component and receive handle size as a prop. Then go down below and create a function. I'm gonna name it handle change, and it takes a value parameter. Inside of this function, I'm gonna set range into a value parameter and fire handle size, and then pass an argument of value. Then go down below inside an input tag and create an onChange event. Take an event parameter, then fire handle change and pass an argument which is e.target.value. Save the changes, back to our browser, refresh the page, then head over to single item page, open up the dev tool. Then as soon as I move the filter, you'll see here inside the console a string which says handle size invoked, and next to it is a range value for our size. Back to VS Code, go back to single item inside our handle size function and remove the console.log, then set check into true value, and then create a constant new shoe and set that equals to exact, and filter that into product, and then return only the product with their size double equals to a value parameter. I use double equals because a value parameter is a string and the size is a number. Then finally set shoe into new shoe, save the changes, back to the browser, refresh the page. Now as I'm changing the size, I'm also filtering the shoes to match the size. But then you'll notice we're not able to use the arrow pointer to view the next item. So let's go back to VS Code and fix that. So just go inside our handle increment function and set check into a false. Copy that, then paste that inside our handle decrement function as well. Save the changes, back to our browser, refresh the page, then filter the shoes. Now let's try again, and it works just fine. But if I try to add the item to the cart, it's not going to work. So let's go back to VS Code and make that work. Now since we have already created add to cart function, so let's go back to our single item and receive add to cart function from our cart context API. Then go down below and create another function. I'm gonna name it handle cart, and it takes an ID parameter, and inside I'm gonna fire add to cart, then pass an argument of an ID parameter. Then go down below to our add to cart button and create an onClick event, and then fire a callback function of handle cart and pass an argument of an ID. Save the changes, back to our single item page, refresh the page, and then place add to cart button. Navigate to a cart page, and we have added the item to the cart. Navigate home page again. Let's try another one. Place add to cart, then navigate to a cart page, and we have added another item. Back to VS Code, open up the product context API, go down below and create another function. I'm gonna name it single cart, and it takes an ID parameter. Inside of this function, I'm gonna create a constant and name it new products, and then set that equals to a list, and use the split operator to bring the products into our list. Then write new products dot for each product and say if product.id is equal to an ID parameter, then set that product.incart equals to a true value, and set products into a new product. Then pass single cart function into the value object. Go back to single item and receive single cart here inside our product context API. Then go down below inside handle cart function and fire single cart, then pass an ID parameter. Save the changes, back to our browser, navigate home page, refresh the page. I'm gonna go down below to this product and place buy now. Then as soon as I place the button, it's gonna change into incart to indicate that we have successfully added this item to the cart. Navigate back to home page and pick another product, then place the button and it changes to indicate we have added this product to the cart. Navigate back to home page. I'm going to put a $ over here. Back to VS Code, open up the product child component, then head over to H3 tag with a dynamic value of price and put a $ before that. Save the changes, back to the browser, and now we have our prices.